You can imagine being in TTT and not being stuck for maybe a couple days by now and hearing this song, hearing this song on the radio. Play it, rockers. I cannot even imagine what it must have been like to be in a building, being held hostage and hearing this song. Well, Saya told me that they mashed up the radio when they heard it. Well, I heard that the man who is responsible for playing that song at the time was none other than journalist Dennis Comie. So we have him on Zoom with us this morning to talk about his experience from the 1990 attempted coup, just what that was like for him, and, you know, even 31 years later, how he really feels about everything that happened. Good morning to you, Mr. Comie.
Good morning, Natalie.
Talk to us first about this song. You really played this song during the coup?
I don't recall that, you know, I played many thousands of songs during the 6 days of the crisis, so I really can't help you in that regard. I played many songs. One of the things about the songs we decided was that all of the lyrics would be uplifting and inspiring. So in a kind of a subliminal way, we try to reaffirm democracy and peace and love among members of our community. And I think the music had an enormously positive and healing effect on the general population, on the psyche of the people who were really traumatized over 6 days. You said you didn't understand or could imagine what it was like to be a hostage in a studio. This we're sitting in right now is a studio that several people from TTT and several other visitors were hostage in for over 6 days, lying on the floor, not knowing if they would survive that horrible experience. And it's the reason that's one of the reasons why I try to commemorate this really ugly chapter in our history every year.
Right, and tell us how you commemorate that, because I'm trying to figure, like, with something like this, as you said, probably was so traumatizing for the people who were held hostage. You know, as I said, I can't imagine what it would have been like, but how do you commemorate something like this, such an event?
I get very quiet. I get very quiet and contemplative, and it's always a great sadness because during those 6 days, Trinidad and Tobago lost its innocence, if it had it, or its naivety for that matter. We thought we were paradise, and we could no longer describe the Republic as a paradise.
You know what, Mr. Comie, this is not the first time you've referred to Trinidad and Tobago as a paradise, and I remember with the Bocas Lit Fest, you know, talking about your book, one of the questions that I think was posed by Mohamed Moakil was, whose paradise? Because at the time we had the union that was protesting, and we had, you know, food prices that were high, and a lot of people who were feeling, you know, the burdens of being in the society. So really and truly, was it really a paradise at that point when the Jamaat al-Muslimin attempted a coup?
Well, you know, paradise is a relative term, and we can always decide what the criteria are to define the word paradise. But, you know, you compare Trinidad and Tobago in 1990 to Trinidad and Tobago in 2021, and you understand that, you know, what we have done is 30 years of downhill politics, downhill quality, and I think if you compare the two now, it was very much more of a paradise than it is now. And, you know, the events of 1990 didn't make Trinidad and Tobago any better. On the contrary, it took us back many years. And we're still trying to heal and recoup from that situation. A lot of people don't realize it, but a lot of the emotional and psychological stress we feel now, a lot of the dysfunction, a lot of the corruption, and the endemic and systemic prejudice and discrimination have come all as a consequence of that onslaught against democracy. And we're still trying to work it out as a as a people and as a society.
So you believe that the coup is responsible for the decline that we've seen and the decay that we've seen
Oh,
in the
yes.
politics and in crime?
Oh, very, very much so. I think it was during that period of time that those terrorists, and they are terrorists, they actually gave us the definition of what terrorism is because of the fear that they held this society in for 6 days. They, they committed some of the most heinous, and the word is heinous, not heinous, like some of our ministers like to describe the word, heinous crimes that could be committed and still survive and have a certain modicum of well-being after you have committed certain crimes.
But Mr. McComey,
Technicality.
as you say that, let us explore that a little bit because the Privy Council, the Court of Appeal here had ruled in favor of the men so that they could walk free. But the Privy Council then overturned that decision. Yet, even in light of that happening, we still see these men, they are free men, and no government, the state on a whole, has taken no action against them. So what does that tell you?
Well, it tells us that the justice cannot be considered in this case. That it was because of time and because of delays and because of all kinds of legal technicalities that these people were not rearrested after a very, very long time. So the decision by the Privy Council was irresponsible and inaccurate and conceived, I think.
How so? Inaccurate, you say?
Yeah, because it was a lot of time in between the actual event and the legalese that was required afterwards. It was just like 2 years, so there was no way that the Toronto government, traumatized as it was going to go back and rearrest 114 people and start all of that over again. Trinidadians and Tobagonians tend to spend millions of dollars in inquiries and investigations, and nothing seems to come out of it at the end of it. And we can go right back to that. All the people who are with you can see 30 years of testimony of all kinds of inquiries into all kinds of malfeasance. And, nothing ever seems to get done. So accountability and transparency are problems as regards.
Right. So then how do we heal? How do we get to that point where we see we can start the healing process if we can't even speak of accountability and even transparency?
Yeah, well, we have to acknowledge what has happened, and we have been in denial for 30 years. A lot of people who were involved, like myself, cannot forget the trauma and the fear and the hurt and the pain. But a lot of other people were in denial, and a lot of people sort of like they kind of they hid in the shadows and disappeared into their little holes and cracks when things didn't go their way. So lots of things needed to be cleared up, and I don't think it is the desire of the body politic to go there again after all this time.
Right, but even before you spoke about the time that had passed, that basically it didn't make any sense to go and rearrest 141 men. So I'm trying to figure out if we're not going down that route, and if we have these people who've been so negatively affected by such a traumatic event, because as I said, 24 people died as a result of this. There was a lot of damage to Port-au-Spain, a lot of looting, a lot of shooting, a lot of physical damage, and even, people dying. So it was something that happened. And if these people just crawl back into their nook and crannies and we never really get to why it happened, I'm still trying to figure out how do we start the healing process when all of these things are still outstanding?
It's very, very difficult, and the time has been allowed, the time has passed, and it has been allowed to pass. And with these horrible incidents like 1970 and, around the world in other incidents at other times, including the situation in Washington when Mr. Biden was going to be announced as the official president, you have people who are against each other and do malfeasant things. And if you're a politician, you're in a better position, you're poised to be able to do things or to hide things or to mess things up. And there were lots of people who colluded and supported the Jamaat al-Muslimin. They didn't do it on their own. They did it with great confidence that other people would come in and support them afterwards. And they still walk around with hubris. They've never apologized to the society. And all of these things are healing. Not of what the problem is, a seeking of truth and beauty are things that will help us out of any situation, whether it's a coup or a disease like COVID.
Yeah. You know, and when you speak about what happened in Washington, you know, recently, the question I have to ask you is, you know, after having the experience of 1970, 1991 here in Trinidad and Tobago, and I was speaking to them before the interview, and even last year, where we saw out of the police killings, the people in East Port of Spain, you know, rising up, so to speak, and right across the country, we saw pockets of violence. Do you believe we're vulnerable to having something similar happening in Trinidad and Tobago again? It's a question nobody likes to hear asked, but it's a question that I think is necessary.
I think it's quite possible all over the world. Once there are human beings, and once there's anger, once there's poverty, once there's confusion and malfeasance, you know, people will be stepping on each other right now. You know, it's almost like a stampede. And the young people, the older people, and the sick people, and those who don't have the wherewithal are the ones who are suffering most of all. And this happens in all occasions. You know, we are, instead of coming together and trying to help each other in whatever holistic and innovative ways we can, we are running and being mean and being selfish and hoarding the little bits and pieces. But you can't eat money, you know, and you have to respect human beings. We're all spiritual beings having journeys in a physical body, and it's temporary. So you have to always try to make the right choice, even if it's what to have for breakfast this morning, and you know, oh, what to choose. We always have to try and make the right choice for ourselves, for our families, and for our society. And I'm afraid many bad choices were made in 1990, and we're suffering the consequences as a result.
Mr. McComie, based on what happened in 1990, do you have any particular views about the Jamaat al-Muslimin? Do you feel any kind of way about the Islam faith as a result of what happened?
I'm very, very much an admirer of Islam, because Islam fundamentally means peace. And this is why I'm extremely disappointed that people use religion to carry out their own personal agendas. And once there's violence involved, you must realize that it's not a good thing. And this can be used in any kind of situation. The Muslimin, using hubris and anger and whatever resentment that they had for the authority, did what they did. They haven't apologized for it. They're now well established. None of the issues have been approached or resolved, including the land issue. And people just don't want to go there again. They were petrified of the Muslimin, and I think to a certain extent they still are. You know?
Yeah, so if we live in this fear of, you know, what is, and not treating with the issues as a result of that, should we continue to support the thing that we fear? Should we be giving, you know, money to the Jamaat al-Muslimin to do what it has to do to help it as an organization? Should the state continue its support of the Jamaat al-Muslimin?
Well, it's very interesting you just said that, because I think it's quite obvious now that the state does support the Jamaat al-Muslimin, but the reasons they use, among other things, is that it's a religious organization. Again, these people too are citizens of Trinidad and Tobago, and they are brothers and sisters, gone wrong, but you know, still our brothers and sisters. And unless we come together, we communicate effectively, and we actually address the situation, seeking truth, as I say, we're not going to get anywhere. But since 1990, a lot of the circumstances and the conditions have been used by our politicians to follow their own agendas, you know, and this is why I don't think we'll ever get a very, very clear picture, because there are people like me who are still alive, who were principals of that situation, who colluded to cause this horrible onslaught against democracy. And it's a terrible injury which we have to nurse if we have to heal. And I'm afraid we haven't done very well in that regard. You know, they say you have to actually learn lessons from the past, otherwise you'll be doomed to repeat it. Yeah. And your fellow man, who is an excellent soul, Bob Marley, says we have to emancipate ourselves from mental slavery. Well, that's something that we can do ourselves, and of course with the help of God. But unless we actually broach it as a project and seek truth and beauty, accountability, transparency, and, you know, communicate effectively with our young ones so that they will know how to move forward, we are stuck. We're stuck. And depression, confusion, doubt, worry, all of these things are a result of people not being able to address challenges.
All right. Mr. McComie, we do have to leave it there, but we want to thank you so much for speaking with us this morning. And, you know, hopefully for you, as you said, normally you take a quiet time for you where you reflect on what happened in 1990. Hopefully you can have that quiet time today. But thank you so much for sharing.
Thank you. I would like to invite everybody else in Trinidad and Tobago, because the politicians don't want to do it. Make this a day of prayer and remembrance. Remember those who died. Remember the heroes. You have one right there in your compound. His name is Kelly Buckrady. He's worked for TTT and the radio for 40 years. He was a technical genius behind some of the work we did on the radio. And I think he's retiring in August. If you need my advice, you would hold him on for another 5 years. He is very, very special.
All right. All right.
And you all need to do something about the people who suffered in that place as well. Remember them with honor and fight for democracy. It's a very fragile thing. My book is available at Nigel R. Can bookstores all over Trinidad and Tobago, and it's a very good account, personal albeit, of what happened during that time. So from a historical perspective, it's a very good thing to have for your family.
All right. Thank you so much, Mr. McComie. All right. We are going to take a break. Stay with us here on TTT. It's the Now Morning Show. We'll be right back.
Other way around. Is this the calm before the